My name is Amzie Wenning. I am currently the president of the Frankfort Bourbon Society, and I serve on the board of directors for the Bourbon on the Banks Festival. You know, my earliest memories of bourbon would have been my father and grandfather, mixing bourbon with their Coke and Pepsi. Winning decanters on tip boards at the VFW, and then they would, that's what they would drink. So many of those bottles I wish I still had, and they didn't drink them. But, that was really it. And then I didn't drink bourbon for a long time. I drank more scotch, but I really wasn't that into it. My wife and I moved here from Indiana to Frankfort, Kentucky, and I went and visited Buffalo Trace Distillery. I think I went over to buy a bottle of the bourbon cream. And some people there were talking. It was much different than it is now. It wasn't very crowded. And I just mentioned that I like scotch. And a lady that worked there said, "I think it tastes like dirt." And so that made me think I should probably start drinking bourbon again. And so I did. I probably bought a bottle of Buffalo Trace. I remember when George T. Stagg came out, that was a big thing. And looking back, of course, it's a really big thing now. But I didn't know anything about it. But I was able to get a bottle of George T. Stagg. And, then I think I got an Elijah Craig 18 and some different bourbons. And one thing I noticed was that they had different character. They had different flavor. And, based on the mood I was in, I would sit there and look at the few bottles I had and decide what I wanted to drink. There's a liquor store here in Frankfort called Capitol Cellars, and it was owned by Rachel and Danny Peak. And they would do wine tastings, they would do spirits tastings and things like that. And as you would go there, you would meet other people that were interested in bourbon, wine, and things like that. Through that, I met a good friend, Omar Marshall, who we lost a couple years ago to colon cancer. And when they founded the Frankfort Bourbon Society, early on, one of the board members had to step down. And Omar asked me if I would be interested in being one of the board members. I said I certainly would. The society had probably been in existence for 6 months at that point. And I've served on the board for the Frankfort Bourbon Society ever since. And then, that's when my appreciation, my interest in bourbon really flourished after that. What I think a bourbon society or any type of bourbon interest group accomplishes is it allows you to get together with other people who have similar interests. Sometimes there are people that have much more knowledge than you. They've been interested longer. Maybe they're working in the industry. And so it gets you a chance to be around those people, to discuss different things, to try other things, bourbons that you may not be familiar with. The other thing that I think is interesting is my personal experience through being in the Frankfort Bourbon Society. I have met a lot of other people in the industry. I originally met Hunter Coffey, the distiller at Whiskey Thief Distillery, when we decided to distill some bourbon here. I have met other owners and distillers, people like Dr. Pat Heist and Shane Baker down at Wilderness Trail, Alan Bishop at Spirits of French Lick in Indiana. I've met these people and they have tremendous knowledge. And for someone who is interested in it, for example, me, I love to cook. I have a background as a scientist. And so you can really, when it comes to distilling, you can go as deep as you want to go. So if you have someone that's very knowledgeable, you can ask them, well, where does this flavor come from? Or, what if you mash in at a different temperature? What if you ferment at a different temperature? You learn about heads cuts and tails cuts and everything else. And that, I think, is the real benefit. So if someone is interested in not only bourbon, but the industry, how it works, how the product is made, join a society. When the distiller or someone from the distillery is there talking, ask them questions. Usually, even when the event's over, they're going to stay around. And over time, you can get to meet some just wonderful people in this industry. I think the Frankfort Bourbon Society, we are lucky with our location, being very close to several distilleries. Buffalo Trace, of course, is right here. Whiskey Thief is here in Frankfort. People may not know, but Jim Beam has a really big presence here in Frankfort with the old Granddad plant. Been fortunate enough to go down there a few times and go on some tours. We also have Castle and Key, Woodford Reserves right down the road, Wild Turkey's right down the road, Four Roses. So that is something that's just great that we have. I think one of the things we're really lucky with here in Frankfort is having Whiskey Thief Distillery. And with them being a craft distillery, you can have access that you can't have at the much larger distilleries. And something interesting we have done here is a few years ago, we came up with the idea of distilling our own mash bills. And so every year we formulate our own mash bill. We come over and have it distilled at Whiskey Thief. And we really play around with this. It's not just some generic mash bill. It's usually some off-the-wall mash bill and or ingredients that I come up with that drives Hunter crazy trying to distill that stuff. But through the influence of other people I've met, such as Alan Bishop, got me interested in heirloom corns. And so we have been sourcing our corn and other grains from Dancing Star Farms in Pennsylvania. We have been playing around with yeasts, and so, Dr. Pat Heist is a wonderful resource with their company Firm Solutions, so I can talk to him. He'll tell me which one of their yeasts to use. We've played around with using custom malts from Sugar Creek Malts in Indiana. So we put in caramel malts, smoked malts. Alan Bishop has been kind enough to even let us use some of the yeasts that he has harvested from historic distilling sites in Indiana. So we really play around, really do some interesting stuff. Our oldest product here will be 4 years old in December. So we're excited to see how that's coming along. At Frankfort Bourbon Society, we do continue to do single barrel picks with distilleries, and that is becoming something that's a little harder to do these days. More and more distilleries are going to allocations based on the sales you have. And so it used to be that just an individual off the street could say, I want to buy a barrel, and they would say, okay. And now you almost need to team up with a liquor store that moves a ton of volume to get barrel picks, or have some really good contacts within the distillery. And we are fortunate to have some of those contacts here at the Frankfort Bourbon Society. So I don't intend our distilling and the mash bills we're having distilled at Whiskey Thief to stop us from doing that. This is really just something else we're doing on the side that I think is unique. And I would really encourage other bourbon societies to find someone nearby, another craft distillery, and see if they could form a partnership like this, because it also gives our members this hands-on experience you just don't get elsewhere. They can come over when we're cooking the mash, while we're actually distilling. And it's something that really so far everyone has enjoyed the whole process. So I think for the future of the Frankfort Bourbon Society, we really want to continue what we're doing, which is giving our members a way to gather and continue to be educated about bourbon and the bourbon industry. We do want to continue our partnership here at Whiskey Thief. We have 20 barrels aging here right now. We continue to grow that. And I think that's really it. We just mostly having those events, continuing to come up with ideas, hopefully new ideas that will keep people interested, and continue promoting the native spirit of Kentucky. The Bourbon on the Banks Festival started in 2019. And there was a woman that worked at Kentucky State University. Her name was Wendy Kobler, and she really came up with the idea for Bourbon on the Banks Festival. And it was really being put on by Kentucky State University. For one reason or another, the university decided they didn't want to proceed with this event. Wendy approached us at the Frankfort Bourbon Society to see if we would take over the event. And we saw the potential, and what it could do for our community. So the Frankfort Bourbon Society did agree to take over the festival, but really as a temporary placeholder until the new 501c3 corporation could be formed. And so that's sort of the background on Bourbon on the Banks Festival. Bourbon on the Banks Festival is held at Riverview Park here in Frankfort, Kentucky, just upstream from Buffalo Trace Distillery. It's a beautiful setting right along the Kentucky River. And it's a festival where we invite distilleries. We've normally averaged 50 plus distilleries. We also have wineries and breweries present, food, bourbon-related crafts, and things like that. The important reason for having events like the Bourbon on the Banks Festival, I think there are actually a few good reasons for having it. One, it helps to promote distilling and distilleries. One thing where we may be slightly different is we don't charge the distilleries to participate. And so for a lot of your craft distilleries, I think that's important. They may not have the budget to go to very many of these festivals, especially when you're considering the current cost of travel. And so I think the distilleries can come and share their products. And when we go to a liquor store and we look now, there are untold numbers of different types of bourbon on the shelf to choose from. And there may be a certain distillery that we may never try. And, most of us have tried the big distilleries. They may have a new product or something that we haven't tried. But it's a good chance to come and try a distillery that you may not otherwise try. You may find a new product that you like. Another interesting thing is just as far as gaining knowledge. Frequently, the smaller craft distilleries, the distiller will be there. You can ask them questions, where does this flavor come from? Why did you make the product this way? And they can actually tell you that. I think the other really important thing is that we can use people's love for bourbon and distilled spirits to do good in the community. So the Bourbon on the Banks Festival is a not-for-profit, and we donate to various charities here in Frankfort. And that's sort of changed a little bit every year, but one thing we do is we give a scholarship to a student, a local student who is in an accredited fermentation or distillation program. We tend to donate to some other charities that are local, that are related to children and or families. We also donate to the White Oak Initiative, which is about promoting the sustainability of white oak tree, which we have to make bourbon. That's what our barrels are made from. So, I think it's the enjoyment, it's sharing the knowledge, trying some new things, but probably my favorite part is the philanthropy, giving back to the communities. It has continued to grow. I think from the first year to the second year, we were a little worried because we had to take a year off because of COVID. And then, really a lot of COVID precautions and protocols were still in place. But from the first event to the second event, we actually grew our attendance over 30%. I know from 21 to 22, we actually grew 22%. This past year, we had attendees from 35 different states and 2 other countries. So I do think we will continue that trajectory. The main thing I do want to do is grow this into a bigger festival, perhaps even more days. My goal would be that I would love for this to be a week-long festival, really just with the hopes that we can raise more money to make a difference in the community. As far as joining the Frankfort Bourbon Society, we don't really have any stringent requirements for participation or anything like that. We don't really have regular meetings other than a board meeting. We do have monthly meetings. We call them our Tuesday night socials, first Tuesday of every month at a local establishment, really just to help promote that establishment. Usually they'll put together a little special cocktail or have a featured bourbon or something they may want us to try. We have just started a new monthly event that we call our Third Monday Member Meetup. Really a very informal event just for our members to show up. If they have maybe a new bottle from a new distillery or something they want to share, they think people may enjoy, they can bring that and share it with others. To join the Frankfort Bourbon Society, it's really pretty simple. Just Google Frankfort Bourbon Society or go to frankfortbourbonsociety.com. click on membership, and it's that simple. Make your payment and join from there.